Police sirens sliced through the silence of Silver Lake. My mother's face twisted in rage as she clawed at the 7-foot iron gates, screaming that I was letting my brother starve while I lived in a palace built on 10 years of blood. She didn't realize my refusal tonight wasn't selfishness. It was a trap set over 5 years. I wasn't holding a gate key, but the thick file that would send her golden child to prison forever. My name is Andrew Brown, and for the last 5 years I have existed as a ghost in a machine of my own design. Standing here on the cantilevered balcony of what Architectural Digest magazines have dubbed the Glass Fortress, I watched the relentless Seattle rain wash against the invisible barriers I had erected between myself and the world. It was 2 a.m. The air up here in the hills outside the city tasted of pine needles and ozone, a sharp, clean scent that cost millions of dollars to secure. Below me, the city was a grid of amber and white lights, a chaotic sprawl of humanity that I could observe but did not have to touch. That was the point of the fortress. That was the point of everything I had done since the day I walked out of my mother's house, with nothing but a duffel bag and a burning cold rage in my chest. To the outside world, I am a cipher. At 34 years old, I am the lead landscape architect and silent partner at Horizon Zen Arch, a firm known for turning chaotic urban spaces into orderly meditative sanctuaries for the ultra-wealthy. My clients pay me exorbitant fees not just for my eye for lines and negative space, but for my discretion. They see a man who speaks little dresses in monochromatic bespoke suits and never attends the gala openings of the gardens he designs. They call me stoic. They call me focused. Occasionally, behind their champagne flutes, they call me cold. They have no idea how right they are. Coldness was not a personality trait I was born with. It was a survival mechanism forged in the fires of the Brown household. The rain intensified, drumming a rhythmic tattoo against the tempered glass railing. It reminded me of the noise in my head whenever I thought of them. The family. Specifically my mother Linda and my older brother Kevin. In any normal narrative, the older brother is the protector and the mother is the nurturer. In the twisted reality of my upbringing, Kevin was the golden idol, and my mother was the high priestess who demanded sacrifices to keep him shining. Kevin was 38 now, but in my mind, he was eternally stuck at 16, the age when he realized that a charming smile and a lack of conscience were a faster route to money than hard work. Kevin was a failure by every objective metric of adulthood, yet he was celebrated as a misunderstood genius within the walls of my mother's home. He was a gambler, a liar, and a sloth who viewed other people's wallets as his personal emergency fund. But to Linda, he was just unlucky. He was always the victim of a bad boss, a rigged system, or a jealous friend. I, on the other hand, was the utility. I was the steady one, the boring one, the one who didn't get the jokes because the jokes were usually at my expense. They called me unfeeling because I refused to laugh when Kevin swindled a neighbor out of $50 for a lawn mowing job he never did. They called me selfish when I locked my bedroom door to protect the cash I earned bagging groceries. "You think you're better than us, Andrew," my mother used to sneer usually, while counting out bills from my own wallet that she had raided while I was at school. Family helps family. That is the rule. But it wasn't a rule. It was a parasitic tether. I took a sip of the sparkling water. I held the bubbles, biting my tongue. The silence of the house was profound. The glass fortress was a marvel of modern engineering. 3,000 square feet of steel concrete and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered transparency only from the inside out. From the outside, the reflective coating turned the house into a mirror, forcing anyone who approached to look at themselves. It was a subtle architectural aggression that I was particularly proud of. I built this place to be impenetrable. I built it to be the antithesis of the chaotic, debt-ridden, emotionally volatile environment I grew up in. Here everything had a place. Everything was paid for. Everything was mine. That concept, ownership, was the only inheritance I cared about, and it didn't come from my parents. It came from Uncle Marcus. I closed my eyes and let the memory of him wash over me warmer than the damp Seattle air. Uncle Marcus had been my father's brother, a black sheep in his own right, but for different reasons. The family story was that Marcus was a miser, a lonely old man who hoarded his pennies and died with nothing to show for it but a dusty house and a bad reputation. Kevin used to mock him at Thanksgiving dinners, making fun of Marcus's frayed collars and the old sedan he drove for 20 years. Linda would just shake her head and say Marcus didn't know how to enjoy life. They were wrong. They were so spectacularly, beautifully wrong. Marcus saw me. He saw the way I looked at buildings, the way I organized my sketches, the way I retreated into silence to escape the noise of Kevin's latest drama. When I was 22, just before he died of pancreatic cancer, Marcus called me to his bedside. The smell of antiseptic and old paper was thick in the room. He gripped my hand with a strength that belied his frailty. "Andrew," he had rasped, his eyes bright with a secret amusement. "The world is full of tenants and landlords. Your brother is a permanent tenant. He rents affection, he leases respect, and he borrows time. He owns nothing, not even his own mistakes. You are a builder." He then told me the secret that I had guarded with my life for over a decade. Marcus wasn't poor. He was quietly, staggeringly wealthy. He had invested in real estate and tech stocks in the early 90s and simply never changed his lifestyle. He told me he had set up a trust, the Marcus Trust. "They think I'm leaving nothing," Marcus had whispered, a mischievous grin tugging at his lips. "And for them, that is true. If Linda or Kevin get a hold of a single dime, it will be gone in a week, spent on bad bets and flashy cars. But you, Andrew, understand the power of the deed. You understand that money isn't for spending. It is for fortifying." When he died, the family was furious to learn the estate appeared to be insolvent. Kevin had thrown a tantrum at the funeral, kicking a wreath, because he had already pre-spent the inheritance he thought he was getting on a luxury vacation. I stood there stone-faced, mourning the only man who loved me while secretly holding the keys to a kingdom they couldn't even imagine. The Marcus Trust had funded my education. It had provided the seed capital for my buy-in at Horizon Zen Arch. And it had built this house. To this day, Linda and Kevin believe I am simply a comfortable architect living in a nice condo somewhere in the city. They have no idea about the glass fortress. They have no idea about the portfolio of commercial real estate I own under shell companies. They think I am just doing okay, perhaps slightly better than average, which is why their requests for money have remained in the hundreds or low thousands. Amounts I could refuse without raising suspicion about my true net worth. I opened my eyes and looked out at the darkness. The trust was my shield. It was the reason I could sleep at night. But deep down, beneath the layers of Italian wool and the calm demeanor, I knew the peace was fragile. You cannot sever a limb without a scar, and you cannot cut off a toxic family without phantom pains. I walked back inside the motion sensors, bringing the lights up to a dim, warm glow as I moved through the open-plan living room. The furniture was low and sleek, designed to not obstruct the view. A single piece of art, a jagged brutalist sculpture of twisted iron, sat on the center table. It felt like me, twisted by pressure but hardened into something unbreakable. I checked my watch. 2:15 in the morning. Why was I awake? Perhaps it was a premonition. The air in the house felt heavy, charged with a static that had nothing to do with the storm outside. I went to the kitchen island, a slab of black marble, and poured another glass of water. My reflection in the dark window opposite me looked tired. There were lines around my eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago, the cost of vigilance. Then the silence shattered. My phone, resting on the marble countertop, began to buzz. The sound was aggressive, an angry insect vibrating against the stone. In the perfect quiet of the glass fortress, it sounded like a jackhammer. I stared at it. I didn't need to look at the screen to know. Who calls at 2:15 in the morning? Only tragedy or chaos. And since I had no one I loved enough to fear tragedy, for it had to be chaos, I reached out my hand, steady. The screen lit up the dark room. Mom, a single word that carried 34 years of weight. I let it ring twice, 3 times. I could picture her on the other end. Is she crying? Is she screaming? Is she sitting in a police station or a hospital? Or is she just in her kitchen manic and demanding, needing someone to bleed so she can feel better? I swiped the green icon and brought the phone to my ear. I didn't say hello. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a greeting. I just listened. Andrew! Her voice was a shriek, distorted by bad reception and sheer panic. It wasn't the manipulative whine she used when she wanted $50 for bingo. This was raw fear. It clawed through the speaker and scraped against my eardrum. Andrew, pick up! Oh, God, are you there? I'm here, I said. My voice was calm monotone, a direct contrast to her hysteria. It is 2 a.m, Linda. What is it? I hadn't called her Mom in 5 years. She didn't even notice the slight. They took it, she screamed, her voice cracking. They took the house, the sheriff, the bank. They put a padlock on the door, Andrew. We are on the street. Kevin, the baby, Emily. We are all on the street. I felt a cold sensation wash over me, but it wasn't surprise. It was the grim satisfaction of a prediction, finally coming true. I had known this day would come. I had watched the public records. I knew about the second mortgage, the third refinancing the liens against the family home that Kevin had convinced her to sign. I knew the house of cards was falling. I just didn't expect it to fall tonight. Slow down, I said, leaning against the counter, my eyes fixed on the rain lashing against the glass. What do you mean you are on the street? We have nowhere to go, she sobbed. Kevin, poor Kevin, he tried everything, but those vultures didn't listen. We have the truck packed. We are driving north. My grip on the phone tightened. North. Toward Seattle. Toward me. North? I asked, my voice dropping an octave. We are coming to you, she declared, the panic shifting instantly into entitlement. You have that apartment in the city. You have room. It's just for a few weeks until Kevin gets his settlement money from the lawsuit. We are family, Andrew. You can't say no to family. The air in the glass fortress seemed to drop 10 degrees. The sanctuary was breached. The walls I had built, the distance I had placed between us, the anonymity I had cultivated. It was all hanging by a thread. She didn't know where I lived exactly, only the general area. But she was coming. Like a storm front, she was bringing the chaos I had spent my life escaping right to my doorstep. Mom, I said, the word tasting like ash. You don't know where I live. We will find you, she screamed, the manipulation kicking into high gear. Kevin is driving. We will be there by morning. You better have the door open, Andrew. Don't you dare turn your back on your brother when he is down. Don't you dare. I looked at the reflection in the window. The ghost in the machine was about to be exorcised. I realized then that my peace had been a lie. It was a temporary truce. The war had never ended. The battlefield had just shifted. Andrew, she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Did you hear me? I took a breath, inhaling the filtered, expensive air of my fortress. I hear you, I said softly. I hung up the phone and placed it face down on the marble. The silence returned, but it was different now. It was no longer the silence of peace. It was the silence of a hunter waiting in a blind. They were coming. Kevin with his debts and his lies. Linda with her guilt trips and her rage. They were coming to consume me, to strip this house down to the studs, just like they had done to my childhood. But they didn't know about Uncle Marcus. They didn't know that the Andrew they were coming to bully was dead. The man waiting for them in the glass fortress was someone else entirely, and he was ready. The morning sun did not bring clarity. It brought a spectacle. I stood at the command center of my home office, a room encased in soundproof glass, looking down at the monitor feed that displayed the front gate. The previous night's screaming match had not ended in a retreat. Instead, it had evolved into a siege. My brother Kevin and my mother Linda had not driven away in their battered truck. They had parked it aggressively on the public easement, right outside my property line, a patch of manicured grass that belonged to the city, but was maintained by my landscaping crew. They had erected a tent. It was not a camping tent suitable for the outdoors. It was a cheap, neon blue pop-up canopy they must have salvaged from the truck's chaotic cargo. Underneath it, they had spread out sleeping bags and coolers, creating a shantytown aesthetic that clashed violently with the minimalist slate-gray architecture of the neighborhood. It was a strategic eyesore. It was a middle finger raised directly at my front door, designed to be impossible to ignore. But the physical occupation was the least of my problems. The real war had started in the digital realm. Around 10 in the morning, my phone alerted me to a spike in mentions on social media. I usually kept my digital footprint scrubbed clean, but the algorithm finds everyone eventually. I opened the app and felt my stomach turn over. There, trending locally, was a video titled "The Heartless Architect." It was a live stream recorded by my mother. In the video, she was standing in front of my gate, the imposing steel bars rising behind her, like the entrance to a villain's lair. She looked haggard, her hair deliberately messed up to enhance the effect of destitution. She was crying heavy, heaving sobs that I knew from experience she could summon on command. "Look at this," she wailed into the camera, panning the lens up to the distant gleaming glass structure of my home. "My son lives in a castle, a fortress, and look where his own flesh and blood are sleeping tonight." She turned the camera to show Kevin, sitting dejectedly on a cooler, his head in his hands, looking like the picture of a broken man. Then, she did the unforgivable. She pointed the camera at the back seat of the truck where Kevin's son was sleeping. "My grandbaby is sleeping in a truck because his uncle, who has millions, won't open the gate. We are starving, we are cold, and he is in there drinking wine and laughing at us." The narrative was simple, brutal, and completely devoid of context. It did not mention the stolen college fund. It did not mention the gambling debts. It did not mention the 5 years of peace I had bought with my silence. It was just a rich man versus a poor family, and the internet devoured it with a ravenous hunger. I scrolled through the comments. They were a torrent of vitriol. "Eat the rich. What a monster. Drop the address, let's go pay him a visit. Family is everything. This guy deserves to rot." The court of public opinion does not require evidence. It only requires a villain, and Linda had cast me perfectly. I watched as the view count ticked up by the thousands every hour. The anonymity I had cherished was evaporating. People were doxing the neighborhood, narrowing down the location of the glass fortress. I drove to the office that day using the rear service exit, avoiding the front gate entirely. When I walked into Horizon's Zen Arch, the atmosphere was brittle. Usually the junior architects would nod or offer a polite greeting. Today, heads snapped down to look at blueprints or computer screens. The silence was loud. They had seen the video. They were wondering if the quiet, disciplined man they worked for was actually a sociopath who let his mother sleep on the pavement. I went straight to my office and closed the door, but the sanctuary of work was compromised. My inbox contained 3 emails from clients, asking vague probing questions about personal matters and whether they might impact project timelines. They were nervous. High-net-worth individuals do not like scandal. They pay for landscaping to hide from the world, not to invite viral mobs to their doorsteps. Then came the text from Emily. Kevin's wife was the only variable in this equation that I could not fully calculate. She was a mouse of a woman beaten down by years of Kevin's gaslighting and Linda's bullying. The text appeared on my private line, a number she shouldn't have had, which meant she had gone through Kevin's old contacts. "Andrew, I am so sorry. I told them not to do this. I told them we should go to a shelter. Kevin took my phone earlier. I am scared. He says this is the only way to get what is ours. Please don't hate me." I stared at the screen. What is ours? That was the phrase that stuck. Kevin had convinced himself and her that my success was somehow stolen from him, that my hard work was actually a shared resource he had a claim to. I didn't reply. Replying would be an admission of engagement. I simply took a screenshot and filed it into the encrypted folder labeled The Siege. By early afternoon, the intercom on my desk buzzed. It was the senior partner, Mr. Sterling. "Andrew." His voice was gravelly, devoid of its usual warmth. "Could you step into my office for a moment?" Sterling was a man of the old school. He cared about prestige and propriety. When I entered his office, he didn't offer me a seat. He was standing by the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. On his desk, a tablet was playing Linda's video on a loop, the sound muted, but the image of my gate clearly visible. "We have a problem," Sterling said, turning to face me. "We have reporters calling the front desk. They want to know if Horizon Zen Arch supports, and I quote, elder abuse and child neglect." Obviously, I know there are two sides to every story, Andrew. But the firm cannot be associated with this kind of circus. "It is a personal matter," I said, my voice steady, though my pulse was hammering in my throat. "It is an extortion attempt. I am handling it." "Handle it faster," Sterling snapped. "I don't care who is right. I care about the optics. If protesters show up at our construction sites, or if a client pulls a contract because they don't want a monster designing their Zen garden, you will be a liability I cannot afford. Fix this. Make them go away." I walked out of his office with the ultimatum ringing in my ears. The walls were closing in. Linda's strategy was working. She didn't need to win a legal battle. She just needed to make my life so unbearable that I would pay them to stop. It was terrorism, pure and simple. I returned home early, taking the back route again. When I entered the security room, I rewound the footage from the day. I needed to see what was happening when the cameras weren't live streaming. The footage confirmed my suspicions. The suffering was a performance. At 2 p.m, while Linda was presumably napping in the tent, the camera caught Kevin walking along the perimeter of my fence. He wasn't looking for a way in. He was looking for a way to damage. I watched, zoomed in on the high-definition feed as he pulled a pair of wire cutters from his pocket. He located the junction box for the decorative lighting along the outer wall. Not the security grid, he wasn't smart enough for that, but the landscape lights. He snipped the wires, grinning like a vandal schoolboy. Then he urinated on the expensive limestone pillar that held the intercom. It was petty. It was disgusting. But it was also evidence. I saved the clip. Destruction of property. Indecent exposure. It was growing the pile of ammunition I would eventually use to bury him. But not yet. I needed something bigger. I needed a felony. However, Sterling's warning forced my hand. I could not let them camp there for another 24 hours. The neighbors were already posting on the community board complaining about the shantytown and the crying woman. If the homeowners association got involved, I would be fighting a war on two fronts. I decided to make a move. A pawn sacrifice to protect the king. I typed out a message to Kevin. I knew he wouldn't block me. He was desperate for a response. "I will not let you in. That is final. However, I am willing to pay for a motel for 1 week to get the child off the street. $2,000. Wired to your account immediately. Condition: you pack up the tent, leave the neighborhood, and do not return. If you are still there in 1 hour, the deal is void." It took less than 30 seconds for the read receipt to appear. Then a typing bubble. Make it 5,000. I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. He was sleeping on a sidewalk, yet he was negotiating. 2,000. Take it or leave it. A long pause. Then, send it. I transferred the money, $2,000. It was a painful sum to give to a man who had already stolen so much from me, but it was the price of buying time. I watched the transaction clear. Then I turned back to the monitors. I watched as Kevin checked his phone. He pumped his fist. He shouted something to Linda. I expected them to start packing. I expected to see the blue tent collapse and the trash be gathered. Instead, Kevin sat back down on the cooler. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen furiously. He wasn't looking up motel directions. The frantic tapping the way, he leaned in the sudden grimaces and shouts. I knew that body language. I had seen it 1,000 times growing up. He was gambling. He was on one of those instant casino apps, feeding the $2,000 I had just sent him directly into a digital slot machine. I watched, horrified and mesmerized as 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 20. They made no move to leave. I called his phone. He declined the call. I texted him. You have the money. Leave. He replied instantly. What money? Transfers take time, bro. Hasn't hit my account yet. Besides, Mom is feeling faint. We can't move her. We need a doctor or a bed. Open the gate, Andrew. He was lying. The transfer was instant. We used the same banking network. He had blown it. Or perhaps worse, he hadn't blown it, but he had no intention of leaving. He had realized that the $2,000 was just the appetizer. If he stayed, if he kept the pressure on, if he kept the camera rolling, he could get $20,000. He could get the house. He was using the money to fund his stay. He ordered a pizza delivery to the sidewalk. I watched as a confused driver handed him 3 large boxes. Kevin tipped him with a wad of cash. My cash. My blood ran cold. The strategy of appeasement had failed. I had just funded my own siege. I looked at the image of Linda, now eating a slice of pepperoni pizza while glaring at my security camera. She knew I was watching. She chewed with an aggressive, triumphant rhythm. They weren't going anywhere. The viral video had given them power, and my money had given them resources. I had tried to be rational with parasites, forgetting that a parasite does not stop feeding until the host is dead. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silence of the room. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the tent outside. The blue nylon flapped in the evening wind, a flag of conquest on my doorstep. Fine, I whispered to the empty room. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out the hard drive labeled Marcus Trust, Level 4 Contingency. I had hoped to never use the nuclear option. I had hoped that a motel room and a chance to walk away would be enough. But Kevin had taken the olive branch and set it on fire. The sympathy of the internet was about to clash with the cold, hard reality of the penal code. If they wanted a show, I would give them a show. But the script was about to change. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 2 years. Sarah, I said when the lawyer answered. It is Andrew. Initiate the protocol. And Sarah? Call the private investigator. I need the file on the shell company Kevin used for the fraudulent loan in Nevada. Yes, the one connected to the mob. I looked at the monitor one last time. Kevin was laughing, holding a beer he had bought with my money pissing on my fence again. He wants to play the victim, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that was more dangerous than a scream. Let's see how he plays the defendant. 3 days into the siege, the silence of the glass fortress had been replaced by a low-level vibrating tension that lived in the base of my skull. It was not just the noise from outside, though there was plenty of that. It was the resurrection of old ghosts. My house, designed to be a vacuum of serenity, had become an echo chamber of my childhood trauma. I sat in the living room, with the lights off, watching the shadows stretch across the floor. Every time a car drove by, I flinched. It was a reflex I thought I had buried 15 years ago. It took me back to being 12 years old, sitting in my bedroom, listening to the heavy, stumbling footsteps of my brother coming up the stairs after a bad night at the tables. I remembered the sound of my doorknob rattling. I remembered him demanding the money I had earned mowing lawns. And I remembered the worst part, my mother standing at the bottom of the stairs, not stopping him but yelling at me. "Just give it to him, Andrew. Don't be selfish. He is in trouble." That was the dynamic. Kevin created the fire, and I was expected to be the water draining myself dry to put it out. Now, the fire was on my front lawn. Kevin had escalated his tactics. He was no longer just camping. He was conducting psychological warfare. Throughout the night, I heard the dull thuds of garbage bags being tossed over my 10-foot security fence. I watched on the monitors as he hurled empty beer cans, fast food wrappers, and dirty diapers into my Japanese rock garden. It was a desecration. He knew exactly how much I valued order, so he was drowning me in filth. At 3 in the morning, he started blasting music from the truck. Heavy, distorted bass rattled the triple-paned windows. It was a looping track of aggressive rap music played at maximum volume. I called the private security patrol. I had hired a firm called Blackwatch. "I need you to shut that down," I told the lead officer, a man named Reynolds, over the radio. "We tried Mr. Brown," Reynolds replied, his voice sounding strained. "He pulled a knife. He said he is on public property, and if we touch him, he will sue for assault. The police came by, told him to turn it down, but the second the squad car left, he cranked it back up. He knows exactly where the legal line is, sir. He is dancing right on it." Kevin was not smart in the academic sense, but he possessed a feral cunning when it came to manipulating systems. He knew the police in Seattle were overstretched. He knew a noise complaint was a low priority. He was counting on my exhaustion. But the real blow came the next morning via email. I opened my laptop to find a message from one of my suppliers, a high-end stone importer I had worked with for years. "Andrew, I just got a call from a man claiming to be your brother and business partner. He was asking for a line of credit for a new project in Bellevue. He wanted $50,000 in materials released to him today. I told him I would need your authorization, and he got very aggressive. Is everything okay?" I felt the blood drain from my face. It was not fear. It was a cold, crystallizing fury. Kevin was not just trying to extort me. He was trying to infect my professional life. He was using my name, my reputation to run his grifts. If that stone supplier had been less diligent, Kevin would have walked away with 50 grand of marble, sold it for pennies on the dollar, and left me with the bill and a ruined reputation. I forwarded the email to my legal team with a single note. "Document this. Identity theft, attempted fraud." But the breaking point, the moment that truly severed the last lingering thread of my humanity, happened that afternoon. The weather had turned. The Seattle drizzle had hardened into a biting, freezing rain. The temperature dropped to 40 degrees. I was in the kitchen making coffee I didn't want when I glanced at the security monitor. The blue tent was sagging under the weight of the water. Outside the flap, Kevin's son, my nephew, a boy of maybe 5 or 6, was sitting on a plastic crate. He looked miserable. His face was flushed, his eyes glassy. He was coughing, a deep hacking sound that the high-gain microphone on my gate picked up clearly. I froze. I am not a monster. I am a man who hates his brother, but I do not hate children. That boy was innocent. He was a pawn in a game he didn't understand. Seeing him shivering there in a thin t-shirt while the rain lashed down triggered something in me. Guilt. It was the weapon Linda had used against me my whole life, and it still worked. I set the coffee mug down. My hand was shaking. I couldn't do this. I couldn't watch a child get pneumonia on my doorstep. "Fine," I muttered. "You win." I grabbed a heavy wool blanket from the closet and a bottle of pediatric fever reducer I kept in the emergency kit. I was going to go out there. I was going to bring the boy inside. Just the boy. I would call social services. I would get him help, even if it meant letting the vampires claim a moral victory. I walked to the control panel to unlock the pedestrian gate. But before I pressed the button, I looked at the screen one more time. The angle of the camera shifted slightly as the wind blew. I saw Kevin step out of the tent. He was wearing a thick, waterproof jacket. He looked warm. He looked comfortable. He walked over to the shivering boy. I expected him to wrap the child in a hug to give him the jacket. Instead, Kevin grabbed the boy's shoulder and shook him. I turned up the volume on the audio feed. "Take it off," Kevin hissed. "Daddy, I'm cold," the boy whimpered. "I want my coat." "I said take it off," Kevin snapped, yanking a thin hoodie off the boy's trembling frame, leaving him in just an undershirt. "We need to make the video now. You need to look sick. You need to shiver. If you don't look like you're dying, Uncle Andrew won't give us the money and we won't eat. Do you want to starve?" The boy started to cry. "No." "Then sit there and cry for the camera," Kevin commanded. He pulled out his smartphone hit record, and instantly his face transformed. The snarl vanished, replaced by a mask of tragic desperation. "Guys," Kevin said to the phone, his voice breaking theatrically, "my poor son is freezing to death out here. Look at him. He has a fever of 102 and his uncle doesn't care." I stood there in my kitchen, the wool blanket in my hand. The air in the room seemed to vanish. I watched as Kevin filmed his suffering son exploiting the boy's misery he had intentionally exacerbated for clicks and donations. He was freezing his own child to extort me. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, definitive sound of a bridge collapsing into the abyss. I dropped the blanket. I dropped the medicine. I didn't go to the gate. I walked back to my office, locked the door, and picked up the phone. "Sarah," I said when my lawyer answered. My voice was unrecognizable to my own ears. It was dead, flat. "We are done playing defense." "Andrew?" Sarah Jenkins sounded concerned. "What happened? Did they breach the perimeter?" "No," I said. "They breached the moral event horizon. I want to execute the scorched earth protocol. Everything we have on him. The gambling debts, the tax evasion, the fraudulent disability claims, everything." "Andrew, that will put him in prison," Sarah warned. "It will destroy the family permanently." "There is no family," I replied. "There is just a predator and his victims. I want you to look into a company called Apex Holdings. I saw a transfer on his old bank statements we subpoenaed last year. It looked like a loan repayment, but the amount was odd. $11,400. Find out who owns it." "I am on it," Sarah said. "Give me an hour." It took 45 minutes. When Sarah called back, her voice was sharp with professional triumph. "You were right," she said. "Apex Holdings isn't a lender. It is a shell company registered in Nevada. It has no employees, no office. But the signatory on the incorporation papers? It is a man named Tony the Wrench Veron. He is an associate of the Seattle crime syndicate. Andrew Kevin didn't borrow money from a bank. He borrowed from loan sharks. And he used your identity as the guarantor." The puzzle pieces slammed together. The desperation, the refusal to leave the housing excuse. Kevin wasn't just broke. He was a dead man walking. He needed my house, not just for shelter, but as a fortress against the people he owed. He was trying to drag me into a war with organized crime. "He forged my signature?" I asked. "Looks like it," Sarah said. "This is federal fraud, Andrew. Wire fraud, identity theft, RICO implications if we push it. If we hand this to the FB, he goes away for 10 years minimum." "Draft the affidavit," I said. "I am coming to sign it." I hung up. I needed to get to Sarah's office downtown. I grabbed my keys and headed for the garage. My black SUV roared to life. I opened the garage door, expecting the usual blockade. Sure enough, as I rolled down the long driveway toward the gate, I saw them. The blue tent was flapping in the rain. Linda was standing in the middle of the driveway, her arms spread wide, acting as a human shield. Kevin was behind her filming, with his phone a smirk on his face. They thought I would stop. They thought I would be afraid of running over my own mother. And I wasn't a killer. I stopped the car inches from her legs. I rolled down the window. The cold rain blew in, soaking the leather interior. "Move," I said. Linda slammed her hands onto the hood of my car. Her face was a mask of twisted rage, the makeup running down her cheeks in black streaks. "Where are you going?" she screamed, her voice cracking over the sound of the engine. "You are running away, you coward. You leave us here to die." "I am going to end this," I told her. "Move out of the way, Linda." "We have nowhere to go," she shrieked, delivering the line she had been rehearsing for her audience, the line that was supposed to break me. "Look at your nephew. Look at your brother. So we sleep on the street? Is that what you want? You want your family sleeping in the gutter?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the woman who had watched me work 3 jobs while Kevin partied. I saw the woman who had raided my piggy bank. I saw the woman who had stood by while Kevin froze his own son for a video. "You are not sleeping on the street because of me," I said, my voice cutting through the rain. "You chose the street 15 years ago." She blinked, confused. "What?" "The college fund," I said. "Uncle Marcus left me $20,000 for architecture school. You told me it was lost in a market crash, but I know Linda. I know you forged my signature and gave it to Kevin to pay off his first gambling debt in Vegas. You spent my future to buy him another month at the roulette table." Her jaw dropped. She didn't know I knew. "You made your choice then," I continued, shifting the car into gear. "You invested in the wrong son. And now the bill is due." I revved the engine. It was a bluff, but it worked. She jumped back, stumbling toward the curb. I didn't look back. I drove through the open gate, past the blue tent, past the shivering boy, who deserved better, and onto the main road. I was going to the lawyer. I was going to sign the papers. And when I came back, I wouldn't be bringing blankets. I would be bringing the authorities. The audacity of the grifter is a renewable resource. It never runs out. 2 days after I drove through my mother's blockade, and while my legal team was quietly assembling the paperwork that would detonate Kevin's life, my family decided to throw a party. It was not legally a party, of course. To the permit office of the city, it was likely registered as a community outreach gathering. To the extended network of aunts, uncles, cousins, and fellow parishioners from the Holy Redeemer Church of the Valley, it was billed as an emergency family intervention. But from where I stood watching the spectacle unfold at Horizon Park, a manicured stretch of public green space just 2 blocks down the hill from my front gate, it looked exactly like a celebration of hypocrisy. They had set up picnic tables. They had coolers full of ice and soda. There were platters of sandwiches that I suspected had been donated by a local deli after Linda gave them a tearful recitation of her homeless grandmother's script. It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. By bringing the witnesses to the edge of my territory, they were trying to shame me into submission. They believed that if enough people stared at my house with judgment in their eyes, the walls would crumble, and I would come running out with my checkbook begging for forgiveness. I adjusted the cuffs of my shirt and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror of my car. I was parked 100 yards away, obscured by a line of cedar trees. Beside me on the passenger seat sat a heavy, leather-bound box. It looked like a humidor or a jewelry case. It was neither. It was a delivery system for the truth. "Are you ready, Mr. Brown?" The voice came from the back seat. Reynolds, the head of the Black Watch security team I had hired, was sitting there. Today, he was not wearing his tactical uniform. He was dressed in a pair of khaki shorts and a nondescript polo shirt, looking for all the world like a suburban dad who had wandered over for a free hot dog. "I am ready," I said. Remember, you only intervene if he makes physical contact. Until then, you are just a concerned citizen. Understood, Reynolds replied. He opened the door and slipped out, blending instantly into the park environment. I waited 5 minutes. Then I picked up the leather box, exited the car, and began the long walk toward the gathering. The atmosphere in the park was thick with performative pity. I could see about 30 people clustered around the picnic tables. There was Aunt Martha, a woman who had not sent me a birthday card in 20 years, but who now sat holding Linda's hand, nodding solemnly as my mother wept into a handkerchief. There was Pastor Stevens, a man who drove a luxury sedan while his congregation struggled to pay rent, looking grave and authoritative. And there was Kevin. My brother was the centerpiece of the tableau. He was sitting on a bench looking purposely disheveled. He was holding court, gesturing wildly, with a half-eaten turkey sandwich, presumably recounting the horrors of sleeping in a tent that was currently packed away in his truck because they had slept at a Motel 6 last night, using the money I gave them, though they would never admit that to this crowd. As I crossed the grass, the chatter began to die down. It happened in waves. First, the people on the periphery noticed me. They nudged their neighbors. Then the hush spread inward until the entire group fell silent. 30 pairs of eyes locked onto me. The judgment was palpable. It felt like walking into a courtroom where the verdict had already been read. Linda looked up. Her eyes widened. For a split second, I saw fear. She thought I was coming with the police. But then, she saw I was alone, dressed in a sharp navy suit, carrying a box. Her calculation shifted instantly. She saw a surrender. "Andrew!" she cried out, her voice pitching up into a theatrical wail of relief. She stood up, knocking her plastic chair over. "Oh, praise God, he has come! He has finally come!" She ran toward me, arms open wide. It was a scene straight out of a bad movie. The prodigal son returning, except in this version, the son was the one who paid for the fatted calf. I stopped 10 feet away from the group. I did not open my arms. Linda stopped short, sensing the invisible barrier I radiated. She clasped her hands to her chest instead. "I knew you would come," she sobbed, turning to the crowd to ensure they were catching her good side. "A mother knows her son's heart. I knew you couldn't let your own flesh and blood suffer anymore. We forgive you, Andrew. Don't we, everyone? We forgive him." A murmur of assent went through the crowd. "Amen," said Pastor Stevens. "Forgiveness is divine." Kevin stood up slowly. He wiped mayonnaise from his mouth with the back of his hand. He swaggered over, his chest puffed out. He thought he had won. He thought the pressure had cracked me. "Took you long enough," Kevin sneered, though he kept his voice low enough that the pastor couldn't hear the malice. "I hope you brought the keys. And a check. We have a lot of expenses to cover for pain and suffering." I looked at him. I looked at the crowd. I saw Cousin Jerry, who owed me $500 from a short-term loan 10 years ago. I saw Mrs. Gable, the neighbor, who used to call the police on me when I played music too loud, but let Kevin throw ragers until 4 in the morning. "I did not bring keys," I said, my voice calm, projecting clearly across the silent park. "And I did not bring a check." The atmosphere shifted. Confused glances were exchanged. "Then why are you here?" Linda asked, her voice trembling, with the beginning of a new rage. "To mock us. To gloat." "I am here to clear the air," I said. "You asked for a family intervention. You invited the community to judge the situation. I think that is a fair idea. But a judgment requires evidence. You have heard Linda's story. You have heard Kevin's story. Now, I have brought some stories of my own." I placed the leather box on the nearest picnic table. It made a heavy, authoritative thud. "What is that?" Aunt Martha asked, squinting through her glasses. "Gifts," I said. "For everyone." I opened the box. Inside, neatly organized by name, were thick white envelopes. Aunt Martha, I said, pulling out the first one. This is for you. I walked over and handed it to her. She took it, looking confused. Cousin Jerry, I said, handing out the next one. Uncle Bob, Mrs. Higgins from the choir, Pastor Stevens. I moved through the crowd distributing the envelopes with the efficiency of a blackjack dealer. Kevin and Linda watched, paralyzed by the bizarre nature of the ritual. They didn't know what to do. Was it money? Was I buying them off? Go ahead, I said, stepping back to the center of the circle. Open them. Aunt Martha was the first. She tore open the seal and pulled out a stack of papers. What is this? She muttered. Then her eyes narrowed. Wait, this is a bank statement. It is Kevin's bank statement from 3 years ago, I explained coolly. You see that highlighted transaction? The one for $3,000. That was the money you lent him for his emergency surgery to fix his back. You remember that. He told you he was in agony. Martha looked up, her face pale. Yes, he said the insurance wouldn't cover it. Read the line item, Martha, I said. Where was that money spent? She squinted. Golden Nugget Casino, Las Vegas. A gasp went through the crowd. He didn't have surgery, I said. He had a weekend at the slots. He posted photos of it on a private Facebook group. I included the screenshots on the next page. You liar, Kevin shouted, stepping forward. That is fake. He doctored it. Sit down, Kevin, I said. The command was so sharp, so filled with authority, that he actually flinched. I turned to Cousin Jerry. Jerry, you have an envelope too. You told everyone Kevin was a victim of bad luck. Open yours. Jerry pulled out a transcript. It was a printout of a text message conversation. That is a conversation between Kevin and his bookie, I said. Read the part, highlighted in yellow. Jerry's face turned red. He read aloud, his voice shaking. I will get the money from my idiot cousin Jerry. He is soft. I just have to tell him some sob story about the kids, and he opens his wallet like a clam. What a loser. Jerry looked up at Kevin. The betrayal in his eyes was absolute. You called me a loser? I didn't, Kevin stammered. Andrew hacked my phone. It is not real. It is all real, I said, addressing the whole group. Pastor Stevens, your envelope contains the police report from when Kevin was arrested for DUI 2 years ago. The one he told you was a misunderstanding because of his medication. You will see he blew a 0.18. And on the second page you will find the email he sent to his friends, calling your sermons the weekly snooze fest for the brain dead. The park was silent. The only sound was the rustling of paper as the guests frantically read through their personalized dossiers of betrayal. I had spent a lot of money on private investigators over the years tracking Kevin's mess, so I could insulate myself from it. I never thought I would use it like this. It was devastatingly effective. The dynamic of the mob is fascinating. It can turn on a dime. One moment they were a united front of judgment against me. The next they were a fractured collection of angry, cheated individuals realizing they had been played. You borrowed $4,000 from me for a car, Uncle Bob shouted, waving his paper at Kevin. You said the car broke down. But you never bought a car. You just paid off a credit card. Linda, Mrs. Higgins said, her voice icy. You told me Andrew beat you. You told me he physically threw you out of the house. But this is a video clip on a USB drive? Security footage, I supplied helpfully. From the day I supposedly attacked her. You will see her throwing a vase at my head while I stand there, with my hands in my pockets. Linda's face crumbled. The mask of the saint fell away, revealing the terrified, cornered narcissist beneath. Stop it, she shrieked. Stop reading. He is lying. He is the devil. He is trying to tear this family apart. The family is already torn, Mom, I said. I am just showing everyone who held the scissors. The muttering grew into shouting. People were standing up confronting Kevin, waving the papers in his face. The shaming ritual had backfired spectacularly. Kevin stood in the middle of the storm, his face cycling through shades of purple. He looked at the crowd, then he looked at me. I was standing perfectly still, a faint, cold smile playing on my lips. It was that smile that broke him. "You son of a bitch!" Kevin roared. He didn't think. He didn't calculate. He just reacted with the raw, violent impulse that had ruled his life. He lunged across the picnic table, scattering plates of sandwiches and cans of soda. He was coming for my throat. His hands were clawed, his eyes bulging with murderous intent. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I didn't have to. 2 feet before Kevin could reach me, a blur of motion intercepted him. Reynolds, the suburban dad in the polo shirt, moved with the terrifying speed of a professional. He stepped in, grabbed Kevin's outstretched arm, and used Kevin's own momentum to spin him around. With a fluid motion, Reynolds swept Kevin's legs out from under him and pinned him face down into the grass. It was over in 3 seconds. "Let me go!" Kevin screamed, thrashing against the ground. His face pressed into the dirt. "I will kill him! I will kill him!" "I wouldn't do that, sir," Reynolds said, calmly, applying just enough pressure to Kevin's shoulder to keep him immobilized. "I am a licensed private security contractor. You just attempted to assault a client in front of 30 witnesses. I am placing you under citizen's arrest until the police arrive." Linda screamed. She ran toward them, beating her fists uselessly against Reynolds's broad back. "Get off him! He is my baby! Get off him!" I watched them. The chaos, the noise, the sheer pathetic ugliness of it all. The guests were backing away horrified. Pastor Stevens was looking at the sky as if asking for a teleportation miracle. I walked over to where Kevin was pinned. I looked down at him. He was spitting grass and curses, his eyes filled with hate. "This is the reality, Kevin," I said, softly, so only he and Linda could hear. "You aren't a victim. You are just a bully who finally picked a fight with someone who hits back." I turned to the crowd. They fell silent again, waiting for my next move. "Enjoy the barbecue," I said. "I believe Kevin paid for the sodas with the money he stole from Aunt Martha." I turned on my heel and walked away. I didn't look back at the screaming mother or the pinned brother. I didn't look back at the shocked relatives. I walked back to my car, the silence of the trees welcoming me. As I sat in the driver's seat, I watched Reynolds in the rearview mirror efficiently, handing Kevin over to a pair of uniformed officers who had just arrived. Officers I had called 10 minutes ago to report a disturbance. I started the engine. My hands were steady. My heart rate was slow. For the first time in days, I felt something approaching joy. It wasn't the warm joy of connection. It was the cold, hard joy of victory. The party was over. Now the trial could begin. The office of Sarah Jenkins smelled of old law books and expensive espresso. It was a sharp contrast to the chaotic scene at the park 24 hours earlier. Kevin had been released on bail, paid for ironically by a payday loan Linda had taken out in her own name, further cementing their financial ruin. And they were back at the motel plotting their next move. But while they were playing checkers, I was revealing the chessboard I had been building for a decade. "I need you to look at the codicil to the Marcus Trust," I said, sliding a yellowed envelope across the mahogany desk to Sarah. The section marked the Heritage Protocol. Sarah, a woman who had seen every form of corporate malfeasance in her 30 years of practice, adjusted her glasses. She pulled out the documents. Her eyes scanned the dense legal text, and then they stopped. She looked up at me, her mouth slightly open. "This is a forensic accounting of your grandparents' estate," she said, her voice hushed. "Andrew, this says the house didn't go to the bank. It says it was sold to a private buyer in 2010. "Correction," I said, leaning back in the leather chair. "It was sold by my mother and Kevin. They forged my grandfather's signature 3 weeks before he died in hospice. They sold the ancestral home, the one that had been in the Brown family for 80 years, to a flipper for quick cash. Marcus found out about it 6 months later. He tracked down the notary who stamped the deed, a friend of Kevin's from the pool hall who was later disbarred for fraud. "Why didn't Marcus go to the police?" Sarah asked. "Because Marcus played the long game just like he taught me," I replied. "He bought the house back from the flipper quietly using a shell company. And then he held on to the evidence of the forgery. He gave it to me on his deathbed with a simple instruction. Use it when the wolf is at the door. Well, the wolf is currently trying to hotwire my life, but that was only the first layer of the onion." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a thicker file. This was the one that would terrify Kevin if he had the capacity to understand high-level finance. "You mentioned yesterday that Kevin is running from loan sharks," I said. "And we know he owes money to every bank in the state. But do you know who holds the majority of his commercial debt?" Sarah frowned. "I assumed it was scattered across various collections agencies." "It was," I said. 2 years ago, Kevin defaulted on a massive business loan. He took out for a crypto mining startup that didn't exist. The bank charged off the debt. They sold it in a bundle of bad assets. I bought that bundle." Sarah stared at me. "You bought his debt?" "I bought all of it," I said calmly, "through a holding company called Cerberus Ventures. I bought his credit card defaults. I bought his failed car loans. I bought the judgment from his landlord 3 years ago. I paid pennies on the dollar, maybe 5 cents for every dollar of debt. But legally, I own the full value." I tapped the file. "I am his primary creditor, Sarah. I currently own about $400,000 of Kevin's debt. I could have garnished his wages if he had any years ago. I could have forced him into bankruptcy. I didn't. I let the interest compound. I let him dig the hole deeper. I wanted him to feel free right up until the moment the trap snapped shut." Sarah looked at the file, then at me. There was a mixture of admiration and fear in her eyes. "You are the shark, Andrew. He is running from you to you." "Exactly," I said. "He thinks I am his savior. In reality, I am the executioner waiting for him to put his head on the block." My phone buzzed. It was an alert from the Glass Fortress security system. Alert, garage sector, unauthorized entry. I checked the feed. My blood pressure spiked. "We have to go," I said, standing up abruptly. "They are at the house, and this time they are inside." The drive back to the fortress took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. When I arrived, the scene was a chaotic tableau of incompetence and entitlement. A delivery truck from a furniture company was parked in the driveway. The driver, a young man who looked terrified, was standing by the open garage door, wringing his hands. He had made the mistake of leaving the remote sensor open while he unloaded a set of patio chairs I had ordered weeks ago. And inside my garage, sitting behind the wheel of my vintage Jaguar E-Type, was Linda. She had the engine revving. The garage was filling with exhaust fumes. She was screaming something at the delivery driver, gesturing for him to move his truck so she could peel out. I slammed my SUV into park and sprinted toward the garage. "Get out of the car!" I shouted, my voice echoing off the concrete walls. Linda jumped. She looked at me, her eyes wild. She didn't look ashamed, she looked defiant. "This is family property," she yelled over the roar of the engine. "You owe us. Kevin needs a car to get to a job interview. You have 5 cars. You are selfish if you don't share." "It is not family property," I roared, reaching through the open window and killing the ignition. I snatched the keys from the dashboard. "This is theft, Linda. Grand Theft Auto." "It is not theft if it is your mother," she screeched, scrabbling at my arm with her nails. "I gave birth to you. Everything you have is mine by right. God sees you, Andrew. God sees your greed." Sirens wailed in the distance. The delivery driver had called 911. Two patrol cars pulled up moments later. The officers who stepped out looked weary. They recognized the address. They recognized the players. "Okay, break it up," the older officer said, walking into the garage. "What is going on now, Mr. Brown?" "She broke into my garage," I said, trying to keep my breathing steady. "She attempted to steal this vehicle." "I was borrowing it," Linda sobbed instantly, switching into her victim persona. She collapsed against the fender of the Jaguar, sliding down to the floor in a heap of theatrical misery. "My son, he treats me like a criminal. I just needed to go to the pharmacy. I have a heart condition. I felt faint. I saw the car. I just wanted to get medicine." "And he calls the police on his dying mother." The officer looked at me, then at Linda. He sighed. "Mr. Brown," he said, pulling me aside. "Look, she is in your garage. There is no sign of forced entry because the door was open. She has a set of keys." "Keys she stole from the hook by the door 10 seconds ago," I interrupted. "I get it," the officer said. "But to a judge, this looks like a domestic dispute. A mother borrowing a son's car. If we arrest her for grand theft auto, the DA is going to laugh it out of court. They will say it is a civil matter. Do you really want to drag your mother to jail in handcuffs for sitting in your car?" I looked at Linda. She was watching us through her fingers, gauging the reaction. She knew exactly how to play the system. She knew the gray areas of the law better than most lawyers. If I arrested her now, she would play the martyr. The press would spin it. Rich son, jail sick, mother over car. It would muddy the waters. I needed a clean kill. I needed federal charges. I needed something that couldn't be explained away as family drama. "No," I said coldly. "I don't want to arrest her today." I walked over to Linda. "Get out. Get off my property. If you come back the next time, won't be a discussion." Linda scrambled up, a smirk flickering on her face for just a second. She thought she had won. She thought I was weak. She scurried down the driveway to where Kevin was waiting down the street, lurking out of sight, like the coward he was. But as I watched them retreat, I noticed something. In her haste to borrow the car, Linda had dropped her purse on the garage floor. It had spilled open. I waited until the police left, filing their report as disturbance resolved. Then I walked over to the purse. I didn't touch it with my bare hands. I used a pair of gardening gloves. I was looking for keys or ID to return to her. Or so I would tell myself. But what I found was far more interesting. Tucked into a side pocket was a crumpled manila envelope. It was thick. I opened it. Inside were blueprints. My blueprints. They were copies of the schematics for a high-security commercial project Horizon Zen Arch was bidding on, a data center for a tech giant in Redmond. These documents were confidential. They were trade secrets. And stapled to the front of them was a fake contract, investment agreement. Horizon Zen Arch, Brown Family Partners. Kevin wasn't just using my name to get small loans. He was pitching investors on a fake partnership. He was showing these stolen blueprints to people claiming he was a silent partner in my firm and taking deposits for construction contracts that didn't exist. I flipped to the back page. There were signatures, 3 of them, local small business owners. The total sum listed in the deposit column was $60,000. He was running a Ponzi scheme using my intellectual property. This wasn't a civil dispute. This wasn't a family squabble. This was industrial espionage and wire fraud. I looked at the signature on the bottom of the fake contract. Andrew Brown. It was a clumsy forgery, but it was close enough to fool a layman. A dark, cold sensation spread through my chest. It was the feeling of the final tumblers, in a lock, clicking into place. I picked up my phone and dialed Sarah again. "Don't file the debt paperwork yet," I said. "Why?" she asked. "Did you change your mind?" "No," I said, staring at the forged signature. "I found the nukes. Kevin isn't just a debtor. He is a felon. He is selling shares in my company. I have the papers. Andrew, Sarah's voice turned serious. If he is soliciting investment with forged documents, that is SEC territory. That is FBI. I know, I said. Prepare the package. But don't send it to the local police. Send it to the special agent in charge of the Seattle field office. I want them to pick him up for something he can't bail his way out of. I looked down the street where the blue tent was invisible, but its presence was felt. Linda had tried to steal a car, but in doing so she had delivered the evidence that would bury her son. He wanted to be a partner, I whispered to the empty garage. Fine. He is about to be a partner in a federal indictment. I took the blueprints and the fake contract, placed them in a plastic evidence bag I kept for site samples, and walked back into the glass fortress. The siege was annoying, yes, but the enemy had just made a fatal error. They had handed me the gun, loaded it, and pointed it at their own heads. All I had to do now was pull the trigger. The art of the ambush lies not in the attack itself, but in the lure. You must convince your enemy that they have won. You must present them with the very thing they desire most, wrapped in a bow of your own apparent defeat. Narcissists like Kevin and Linda do not understand strategy. They understand only dominance and submission. To trap them, I had to show them my belly. I had to make them believe that their campaign of humiliation had finally broken the walls of the glass fortress. I waited until 10 in the morning on a Tuesday to make the call. It was a calculated time. I knew they would be awake in their motel room, likely hungover watching talk shows and calculating how much longer they could stretch the $5,000 I had foolishly given them. I dialed Linda's number. I pitched my voice perfectly. I did not sound angry. I did not sound cold. I sounded exhausted. I sounded like a man who had been beaten down by the relentless pressure of public scrutiny. You win, I said the moment she picked up. I cannot do this anymore, Mom. The partners at the firm are threatening to vote me out. The clients are pulling contracts. You have ruined me. There was a pause on the other end. Then a sharp intake of breath. I could practically hear the dopamine hitting her brain. I told you, Andrew, she said, her voice dripping with vindictive sweetness. I told you that family comes first. You tried to fight God's will, and look what happened. I am done fighting, I lied, rubbing my temple as if she could see me. I want you to stop. I want the videos taken down. I want the tent gone. I want silence. We need a home, Andrew, she demanded, emboldened by my tone. We are not going anywhere until we have a roof over our heads. I know, I said. I have a property. It is a condo in Pioneer Square. 1-bedroom brick interior secure building. It is not the mansion, but it is a home. I am willing to transfer the deed to Kevin. He will own it, free and clear. A condo! I heard Kevin's voice in the background, muffled but eager. Ask him how big it is. Ask him what it is worth. It is worth $400,000, I said, answering the question he hadn't asked me directly. It is yours. But there are conditions. What conditions? Linda asked suspiciously. I need a clean break, I said. Kevin signs a full release. He admits that this transfer settles all debts, emotional and financial, between us. He signs a restraining order against himself, agreeing never to contact me, my partners, or my clients again. And he signs a statement retracting the lies he told on the internet. If he does that, I hand over the deed today. Today? Linda squeaked. Today at 2 o'clock, I said. At my lawyer's office. If you are 1 minute late, the deal is off. I hung up. I did not give them time to negotiate. I did not give them time to think. I threw the meat into the water and watched the sharks turn. At 1:30, I was sitting in the surveillance room of Sarah Jenkins' law firm. Sarah and I were watching the feed from the conference room down the hall. We had staged the room carefully. It was intimidating, with a long mahogany table and a view of the city skyline, the kind of room where million-dollar deals were signed. We had placed hidden microphones in the flower arrangement in the center of the table, and a high-definition camera behind the mirror on the far wall. "Do you think they will sign?" Sarah asked, adjusting the volume on the console. "They will sign anything," I said, my eyes fixed on the screen. "They are greedy, Sarah. Greedy people do not read fine print. They only read the numbers at the bottom." At 1:45, the receptionist showed them in. They looked ridiculous. Linda was wearing a floral dress that was too tight and a large hat that she likely thought made her look like a matriarch. Kevin was wearing a suit that clearly didn't fit him. The sleeves were too long, swallowing his hands. It was probably bought from a thrift store an hour ago. They strutted into the room with an air of unearned victory. The receptionist offered them water and left, closing the heavy oak door. The moment they were alone, the performance dropped. Kevin threw himself into one of the leather chairs and spun around. "Boom!" he yelled, slapping the table. I told you I would break him. Did you hear him on the phone? He sounded like he was crying." "He was terrified," Linda agreed, walking over to the window to look at the view. "He knows he can't survive without us. He realized that the world sees him for what he is, a selfish brat." 400 grand, Kevin mused, leaning back and putting his feet up on the polished wood. "A condo in Pioneer Square. That is prime real estate." "It will be a good place for the baby," Linda said. "And Emily. We can finally settle down." I leaned forward in the surveillance room. This was the moment. The truth. Kevin laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "Settle down? Are you crazy, Mom? I am not living in some brick box downtown. I hate the city. No parking, too much noise." "Then what are we doing?" Linda asked, confused. "We are selling it," Kevin declared, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that the microphones picked up with crystal clarity. "As soon as the ink is dry on that deed, I am calling a realtor. I already looked it up. We can list it for $390 for a quick sale. Cash buyer." "But Andrew said it was for us to live in," Linda said. "He might check." "Who cares what Andrew checks?" Kevin scoffed. "Once the deed is in my name, it is my property. I can burn it down if I want. I am going to sell it, take the cash, and we are going to Vegas, Mom. I have a system now. I can turn that 400 into 2 million in a week. Then we buy a real house, a mansion, bigger than Andrew's." "Vegas?" Linda hesitated, but I could see the greed overriding her maternal instinct. "Well, maybe a little vacation would be nice. We have been through so much stress." "Exactly," Kevin said. "We deserve it." "This isn't a home, Mom. This is a payout. This is back pay for all the years he looked down on us." I looked at Sarah. She was typing furiously, logging the time codes of the conversation. "We have it," Sarah whispered. "Admission of bad faith, intent to misuse the settlement asset, and implied intent to gamble away the proceeds, which supports our argument that he is financially incompetent." "Keep recording," I said. "I want more." "And that restraining order thing?" Kevin continued, picking at his teeth. "Whatever. I will sign it. Once I have the money, I don't need to talk to him anyway. Unless I lose it. Then maybe we pay him another visit in 6 months. It worked this time, didn't it?" "He is weak," Linda said, sitting down. "He always caves if you yell loud enough." My jaw tightened. The contempt in her voice was absolute. She didn't love me. She viewed me as a vending machine that occasionally needed to be kicked to dispense a product. "Okay," I said to Sarah. "I am going in." I grabbed the stack of documents we had prepared. It was a thick pile, nearly 50 pages. The top document was indeed a deed transfer. It was the bait, but buried underneath in the exhibits and addendums was the trap. I walked down the hall, composing my face. I needed to look defeated. I slumped my shoulders slightly. I loosened my tie. I walked into the conference room and let the door click shut behind me. Kevin took his feet off the table, but he didn't stand up. He smirked. "Hey, little brother. Nice office. A bit stuffy for my taste, but it pays the bills, huh?" "Hello, Kevin," I said quietly. "Linda?" "Don't look so sour, Andrew," Linda said, smoothing her dress. "This is a happy day. The family is healing." "Let's just get this done," I said, placing the stack of papers on the table between us. Kevin eyed the stack. "That is a lot of trees." "I thought you said this was simple." "It is a real estate transfer," I said, sitting down opposite him. "There are tax forms, title affidavits, the settlement agreement, and the non-disclosure agreement. It is standard procedure." I pushed the first document toward him. "This is the deed. You can see the address. Unit 402 Pioneer Square Lofts." Kevin leaned in, his eyes hungry. He scanned the paper. He saw his name. He saw the property description. He saw the words, "Grant Deed." He didn't look at the rest. He just saw the asset. "Looks good," he said, reaching for a pen. "Wait," I said, putting a hand on the paper. "Before you sign, I need to remind you of the terms. By signing this package, you are agreeing that you have no further claim on me or my estate. You are agreeing that the videos you posted were defamatory, and you will delete them immediately. And you are agreeing to never step foot within 500 feet of my home or my office again." Yeah, I got it," Kevin said, waving his hand dismissively. "I get the condo, you get your safe space. Win-win. Give me the pen." He was so eager. He was vibrating with the need to own something. I slid the stack toward him. "You need to sign the main agreement and then initial the bottom of each page of the addendums to acknowledge you have received them." Kevin grabbed the pen. He signed the deed with a flourish. Then he flipped the page. He didn't read the text. He just looked for the line marked "Initial" here. Flip. Initial. Flip. Initial. He was signing his life away one scribbled KB at a time. "You should probably read the financial disclosures in Exhibit C," I said, my voice testing him. "It details the tax liabilities and the debt structure." "I know how taxes work, Andrew," Kevin snapped, not pausing. "I am not an idiot. I will have my accountant handle it." He didn't have an accountant. He had a drinking buddy who used TurboTax. Linda watched him sign, her eyes gleaming. "That is right, honey. Just sign it. Let's get out of here and celebrate." He reached the middle of the stack. This was it. The document was titled Consolidated Debt Assumption and Security Agreement. To a layman skimming fast, it looked like standard mortgage boilerplate regarding the condo. In reality, it was a legal instrument that linked the asset he was receiving, the condo, to the liabilities I had purchased. By signing it, Kevin was acknowledging that he owed Cerberus Ventures, my shell company, $412,000. And more importantly, he was agreeing that the condo he was just given would immediately serve as collateral for that debt. He was also agreeing that any default on the payment schedule, which was set to begin immediately, would trigger a confession of judgment. He signed it. He didn't even blink. Then came the affidavit of business conduct. This was the document where he admitted under penalty of perjury that he had solicited funds from investors for a partnership with Horizon Zen Arch. The clause was buried in a paragraph about warranty of prior business representations. By signing it, he was effectively confirming the authenticity of the fake contracts I had found in Linda's purse. He signed that too. It took him 10 minutes to get through the stack. When he finished, he threw the pen down on the table like a mic drop. "Done," Kevin said, grinning. "So, where are the keys?" I picked up the stack of documents. I tapped them on the table to align the edges. I placed them back in my folder. The keys are with the concierge at the building, I said. You can pick them up anytime after 5 o'clock. Great. Kevin stood up, adjusting his ill-fitting jacket. Well, Andrew, I would say it has been a pleasure, but he laughed. Let's go, Mom. We have calls to make. Linda stood up and looked at me. You did the right thing, Andrew. God will reward you. I am sure he will, I said. They walked out of the room. They walked out with a swagger, high-fiving each other in the hallway. They thought they had just robbed a bank legally. I waited until the elevator doors closed. Then Sarah Jenkins walked in from the side door connecting to the surveillance room. She was holding a tablet. We got it all, she said. The audio of them conspiring to sell the asset immediately. The video of him signing the debt assumption without reading it. The signature on the confession of fraud. Is it watertight? I asked. It is ironclad, Sarah said. He just legally acknowledged the debt you bought. He just collateralized the condo against that debt. And since the debt exceeds the value of the condo, plus the capital gains tax he will trigger by selling it, he effectively owns nothing. Actually, he owns less than nothing. And the fraud admission? That is the cherry on top, Sarah said. We can hand that to the FBI whenever you want. I stood up and walked to the window. I could see the street below. I watched Kevin and Linda exit the building. They were laughing. Kevin stopped to light a cigarette, blowing smoke into the air with the arrogance of a king. Not yet, I said. Let them have their night. Let them go to the condo. Let them call the realtor. Let them think for just 12 hours that they have won. When do we drop the hammer? Sarah asked. Tomorrow morning, I said. When he tries to list the property, that is when he will find out that there is a lien on the title. A lien held by his loving brother. I looked at the folder on the table. It wasn't a settlement. It was a death warrant for their way of life. Get the papers ready for the sheriff, I told Sarah. And call Agent Reynolds. Tell him the subject has signed the confession. We move at dawn. I left the office. I didn't feel guilt. I felt the cold, precise satisfaction of an engineer who has just watched a demolition charge detonate exactly where it was placed. The trap was sprung. The rat was caught. Now, all that was left was to dispose of the pest. The ink was barely dry on the final page when the atmosphere in the room shifted. It wasn't a subtle change. It was a sudden drop in pressure, the kind you feel right before a thunderstorm breaks. Kevin threw the pen down on the mahogany table, the plastic clattering against the wood, and stood up with a grin that was all teeth and triumph. He reached for the heavy brass door handle, ready to walk out into a world where he believed he was finally a property owner, a winner, a man who had beaten the system. Hold on, I said. My voice was low, devoid of the defeat I had feigned just minutes earlier. Sit down, Kevin, we are not finished. Kevin paused, his hand hovering over the latch. He looked back at me, his brow furrowing in irritation. What now? I signed your papers. I signed your little restraining order. Give me the keys and let me get out of here. I have a realtor to call. You don't need a realtor, I said, staying seated, my hands folded calmly on the table. Because you don't have anything to sell. Linda, who had been busy stuffing the complimentary bottled water into her purse, froze. What are you talking about? He signed the deed. I saw it. It says grant deed right at the top. It does, I agreed. But you didn't read the subordination clause on page 4, or the debt assumption agreement on page 12, or the confession of judgment on page 30. I nodded to Sarah Jenkins. She moved with the swift precision of a viper. In one fluid motion, she swept the stack of signed documents off the table and locked them into her briefcase. The click of the latch echoed in the silent room like a gunshot. That document, I continued, locking eyes with my brother, was not a gift. It was a transaction. You see, Kevin, I didn't just give you a condo. I transferred a specific asset to you, subject to existing encumbrances. And do you know who holds the encumbrances on that asset? Kevin stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a hook. You own the building. I own the debt, I corrected. Specifically your debt. All $412,000 of it. The gambling debts you ran up in Vegas. The defaulted business loans. The credit cards you maxed out and threw away. I bought it all, Kevin. Every single cent. I stood up slowly, enjoying the look of dawning horror on his face. When you signed that stack of papers, I explained, my voice cutting through the air, you legally acknowledged that you owe my holding company $400,000. And by accepting the condo, you agreed to use that property as immediate collateral against the debt. Since the debt is higher than the value of the condo, you have zero equity. You own a brick box that is already underwater. You can't sell it. You can't borrow against it. And if you miss a single payment, which is due, by the way, on the 1st of the month, I foreclose. I take it back. You are lying, Kevin whispered. His face had gone pale, the color of old ash. That is illegal. You can't do that. It said property transfer. It was a transfer, Sarah Jenkins interjected, her voice sharp and professional. You accepted the transfer of the property and the attached liabilities. It is a standard commercial instrument, Mr. Brown. If you had read the document instead of planning your vacation, you would have seen it. And there is one more thing, I added, leaning forward. The last page you signed, the one you didn't even glance at, that was a sworn affidavit. In it, you admitted to soliciting funds for a non-existent partnership with my firm. You admitted to forging my signature on investment contracts. You admitted to wire fraud. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hanging at the top of its arc. Then the explosion happened. You tricked me, Kevin roared. The sound was primal, a mix of rage and terrified realization. He lunged at the table, his hands clawing for the briefcase where Sarah had stashed the papers. Give it to me. I didn't mean to sign that. Give it back. Sarah didn't flinch. She simply took a step back, and the large, silent security guard, who had been standing in the corner, stepped forward, blocking Kevin's path with a wall of muscle. It is too late, Kevin, I said, my voice rising over his shouting. The documents are signed. The confession is recorded. We have you on video and audio. You just handed me the keys to your prison cell. You bastard! Linda screamed. She threw her purse at me. It hit my shoulder and fell to the floor, spilling stolen water bottles and lipsticks. You lured him here. You set a trap for your own brother. What kind of monster are you? You tricked him. I didn't trick him. I shot back my composure, cracking just enough to let the anger seep through. I gave him a test of character. If he had read the papers, if he had asked questions, if he had shown 1 ounce of responsibility, he would have seen it. But he didn't. He saw a free lunch. He saw a payday. He was so busy counting money he hadn't earned that he signed his own death warrant. Kevin was panting, his chest heaving. He looked wild-cornered. I will tell the judge, he sputtered. I will tell them you coerced me. I will say I was under duress. Go ahead, I said. We have the tape. You were laughing, Kevin. You were joking about going to Vegas. You were bragging about selling the place. There was no duress. There was just greed. Kevin slumped against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor. He put his head in his hands. For a moment, he looked exactly like the little boy he used to be when he broke a window and knew he was caught. I looked at him, and for a fleeting second the old instinct kicked in. The instinct to fix it. The instinct to protect him from his own stupidity. I hated him, yes. But he was my blood, and sending him to federal prison was a bell that could not be unrung. I took a deep breath. I decided to offer one last off-ramp, a final twist that I hadn't even told Sarah about. Stand up, I commanded. Kevin looked up, his eyes red. I am going to give you a choice, I said. A real choice, not a trick. I walked around the table and stood over him. "I have the confession," I said. "I can send it to the FBI this afternoon. If I do, you are looking at 5 to 10 years. No parole for federal fraud. You will miss your son growing up. You will come out a middle-aged man with nothing." Linda began to sob, a low, keening wail. "Please, Andrew, don't. He is your brother." Or, I continued, ignoring her, "We do this my way. Option B." I pulled a folded piece of paper from my inside pocket. It wasn't a legal document. It was a brochure. "This is the brochure for the Crestview Rehabilitation Center in Montana," I said, tossing it onto his lap. "It is a strict inpatient facility. No phones, no internet, hard work, therapy." Kevin looked at the glossy photo of mountains and cabins. "Here is the deal," I said, my voice softening slightly. "You go to Crestview. You stay for 6 months. You complete the program. Then you spend 3 years doing community service. Real service, building houses for the poor, cleaning parks. You get a job. A real job. You pay your own rent. If you do that, if you prove to me that you can be a human being instead of a parasite, I will tear up the confession. I will forgive the debt. I will let you start over." It was a generous offer. It was an insane offer, given what he had done to me. It was the twist that proved I wasn't just a cold-hearted avenger. I was still trying to save him. "You want me to go to rehab?" Kevin asked, his voice trembling. "For what? I don't have a problem." "You have a gambling addiction and a pathological lying disorder," I said. "You are sick, Kevin. I am offering to pay for the cure. I will support Emily and the baby while you are gone. I will make sure they are safe. But you have to go. You have to leave today." The room was silent. Sarah looked at me with surprise. She hadn't known I was going to do this. She looked like she wanted to object, to tell me he didn't deserve it, but she stayed quiet. Kevin stared at the brochure. Then he stared at me. I saw the wheels turning in his head. I saw him weigh the options: prison or rehab, a cell or a chance. Slowly, Kevin stood up. He smoothed his suit jacket. He took a step toward me. I thought he was going to hug me. I thought he was going to cry and thank me for saving his life. "You think you can control me?" Kevin whispered. His eyes weren't filled with gratitude. They were filled with a toxic, burning hate. "You think because you have money you can tell me where to live?" he hissed. "You think you can ship me off to some farm in Montana like a bad dog? You think you are better than me?" "I am trying to help you," I said, stunned. "Help me?" Kevin laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "You are trying to own me. You want to be the big man, the savior. Look at Andrew. He is so good he forgave his brother. I see right through you. You are just jealous because Mom loves me more. You always have been." And then he did it. He drew back his head and spat. A glob of saliva hit my cheek right below my eye. It was warm and wet and utterly degrading. "Keep your charity," Kevin sneered, stepping back as the security guard surged forward to grab him. "And keep your brochure. I am not going anywhere. I am going to sue you. I am going to find a lawyer who isn't in your pocket, and I am going to sue you for fraud, for entrapment, for emotional distress. You tricked me into signing those papers. No jury will uphold that. I will take everything you have, Andrew. I will burn your glass fortress to the ground." I stood there frozen. I didn't wipe the spit away. I let it sit there on my skin, a physical manifestation of my brother's soul. The security guard had Kevin in an arm lock, now forcing him toward the door. Linda was screaming, "Don't touch him! We will sue! We will sue all of you!" "Let him go," I said. My voice is different now. The softness was gone. The hesitation was gone. The tiny, flickering candle of brotherly love that I had tried to cup against the wind had just been extinguished. The guard released Kevin. Kevin straightened his jacket, looking smug. He thought his defiance was strength. He thought he had called my bluff. I took a handkerchief from my pocket and slowly, deliberately wiped my cheek. I looked at the white linen stained with his spit. Then, I dropped it into the trash can. "Plan B," I said. I looked at Sarah. She nodded. She knew what that meant. It meant the nuclear option. It meant no rehab, no support for Emily, no mercy. I turned back to Kevin. He was standing by the door, waiting for me to crumble, waiting for me to beg him to reconsider. I checked my watch. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. "You have 24 hours, I said. My voice was no longer the voice of a brother. It was the voice of a stranger. "Get out of Seattle. Take your mother. Take your truck. If you are within the city limits at 2:31 tomorrow afternoon, the FBI gets the file." "You are bluffing," Kevin scoffed. "You won't send your own brother to jail. Mom wouldn't let you." "Mom has no vote here," I said, my eyes sliding to Linda, who shrank back under my gaze. "And I am not bluffing. The file is already digitized. It is scheduled to auto-send to the special agent in charge at the Seattle field office in exactly 24 hours. The only way to stop it is for me to enter a cancellation code. And I will only enter that code if my private investigator confirms you have crossed the state line." Kevin faltered. For the first time, he saw the abyss. He saw that the safety net he had bounced on his entire life, my guilt, was gone. "You are evil," Linda whispered. "You are purely evil." "I am just a landlord evicting a bad tenant," I said. "You have 24 hours. Tick-tock." I turned my back on them. I walked to the window and looked out at the gray skyline. Behind me, I heard the heavy oak door open and close. They were gone. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked softly. "No," I said, watching the rain streak the glass. "But I will be." I had offered him a hand and he had bitten it. Now there was nothing left to do but clean the wound and lock the gate. The time for family was over. The time for justice had begun. The digital clock on the wall of my security bunker read 3:16 in the morning. The 24-hour deadline I had given my brother was not even half over, but I knew he would not use the time to pack. I knew he would use it to fester. Kevin was like a chemical reaction. Apply pressure, and he did not stabilize. He combusted. I sat in the dark, illuminated only by the cool blue glow of 12 high-definition monitors. My heart was beating with a slow, heavy rhythm like a war drum. I had not slept. I was wearing running shoes and tactical pants, dressed not for an architectural consultation but for a hunt. Beside me on the console lay my phone, the screen already open to the camera app and a heavy-duty flashlight. I was waiting for the end of the world, or at least the end of theirs. The motion sensor on the outer perimeter tripped at 3:20. I leaned forward, my eyes scanning the grid. Camera 4, southwest corner. There they were. The visuals were crisp, rendered in stark black and white by the infrared night vision. The old pickup truck had rolled to a stop about 50 yards down the road, lights off. It was a predator's approach. 2 figures exited the vehicle. Even in the grainy footage, their body language was unmistakable. One figure was large, stumbling slightly, moving with the jerky aggression of a man fueled by cheap whiskey and expensive rage. That was Kevin. The other figure was smaller, hesitant, looking over her shoulder every few seconds. That was Linda. I zoomed in on Kevin's right hand. He was carrying something heavy, a red plastic jerry can. I felt a cold shiver trace its way down my spine, but it wasn't fear. It was a grim, terrible validation. He was actually going to do it. He had threatened to burn the glass fortress to the ground, and for the first time in his life, Kevin was following through on a promise. I watched as they approached the pedestrian gate. Kevin didn't bother with a keypad. He produced a pair of heavy bolt cutters from his jacket. He snapped the lock on the service entrance, a weakness in the perimeter I had intentionally left unreinforced after repairing the fence yesterday. I wanted him to get in. A rat cannot be trapped if it stays outside the cage. "Come on," I whispered to the screen. "Cross the line." He pushed the gate open. He stepped onto the property. Criminal trespass. He walked up the winding stone path, splashing gasoline on my prize-winning hydrangeas as he went. It was a petty act of desecration before the main event. Linda stopped at the gate. She stood there, clutching her purse, looking up and down the street. She was the lookout. My mother, the woman who had taught me to pray, was now standing guard, while her favorite son prepared to incinerate her other son in his sleep. She wasn't stopping him. She wasn't calling the police. She was letting it happen. In that moment, watching her shadow stretch across the pavement, the last microscopic grain of guilt I held for her evaporated. She was not a victim. She was an accomplice. Kevin reached the front of the house. He stood before the main entrance, a towering wall of glass and steel. To him, it must have looked fragile. He didn't know that the glass was laminated polycarbonate, rated to withstand hurricane-force winds and ballistic impacts. He didn't know that the front door was actually an airlock system, a vestibule designed for thermal insulation and security screening. I reached for the control panel on my desk. I disabled the magnetic lock on the outer door of the vestibule. Kevin approached the door. He tried the handle. It opened. He grinned. I could see his teeth in the infrared glow. He thought I had made a mistake. He thought I had forgotten to lock up. He stepped inside the vestibule, a small glass cube about 6 feet by 6 feet separating the cold night air from the inner sanctum of the house. He was now standing on the pressure plate. "Gotcha," I said. I hit the engage sequence. Behind him, the outer door slammed shut. The magnetic bolts drove home with a sound like a gunshot. Clack, clack. Kevin spun around, startled. He tried the door. It was immovable. He turned back to the inner door, the one leading into my living room. He grabbed the handle. Locked. He was trapped in the glass box. I watched him panic. It took about 5 seconds for the realization to set in. He pounded on the glass. He shouted something, but the soundproofing was too good. I could only see his mouth moving in silent, twisted shapes. He raised the gas can, threatening to splash it. I pressed the button marked suppression. High-pressure nozzles in the ceiling of the vestibule hissed to life. But it wasn't water. It was a dense, synthetic security fog. A harmless, but disorienting glycol vapor used to blind intruders. In 3 seconds, the glass box was filled with an opaque, white cloud. Kevin was blind. He dropped the gas can. He was coughing, flailing, trapped in a white void of his own making. I stood up. I grabbed my phone. It was time for the face-to-face. I walked out of the security room, down the long hallway, and into the foyer. I could hear the muffled thumping of his body hitting the glass walls. I walked right up to the inner door of the vestibule. I tapped the keypad on the wall. Ventilate. The fans kicked on, sucking the fog out of the chamber. The white cloud swirled and dissipated, revealing the man inside. Kevin was huddled in the corner, his eyes streaming, clutching his chest. The red gas can lay on its side, leaking fuel onto the expensive slate floor of the vestibule. The smell of gasoline was faint, but distinct, filtering through the vents. He looked up and saw me standing there, safe on the other side of the glass. I raised my phone and hit record. "Smile, Kevin," I said, my voice calm and audible through the intercom system. "You are on the highlight reel." He scrambled to his feet. He looked like a rabid animal. His hair was plastered to his forehead with sweat and condensed fog. "Let me out!" he screamed, pounding his fists against the transparent wall. "I will kill you! Open this door!" "You brought gasoline to my house at 3 in the morning," I said, narrating for the camera, panning down to the spilled fuel. Attempted arson, attempted murder, breaking and entering, and violation of the restraining order you signed 12 hours ago. I was just trying to scare you, Kevin stammered, realizing how bad this looked. I wasn't going to light it. You have a lighter in your hand, I pointed out. He looked down. He was indeed clenching a disposable Bic lighter in his fist. He dropped it, as if it were molten lead. Mom, he screamed, turning to the outer door. Mom, help me! He trapped me! I looked past him through the outer glass to the driveway. Linda had heard the commotion. She was running toward the house, her face a mask of terror. She reached the outer door and pulled on the handle. Locked. She saw Kevin trapped inside, and she saw me standing on the other side. She started beating on the glass with her palms. Andrew! She shrieked, her voice muffled but audible. Let him out! He is claustrophobic! You are hurting him! Open the door! I walked closer to the glass. I looked her right in the eyes. I didn't say a word. I just pointed my phone at her, documenting her presence at the crime scene. You are filming me, she screamed. Stop it! We are leaving right now, just let him out. No, I said. You are not leaving. You are waiting. Waiting for what? Kevin yelled, tears mixing with the snot on his face. Who are you calling? As if on cue, the night exploded with light. Blue and red strobes washed over the front lawn, bouncing off the wet pavement and fracturing through the glass walls of the fortress. It wasn't just one car. It was a fleet. I had not called 911 when I saw them on the camera. I had triggered the silent panic alarm connected directly to the FBI task force handling the wire fraud case. I had told Agent Reynolds earlier that day that my brother had threatened violence. They had a unit parked 2 streets over, waiting for exactly this move. Kevin froze. He looked out at the driveway as 4 unmarked SUVs and 2 patrol cars screeched to a halt. Men in tactical gear poured out of the vehicles. They didn't look like the friendly neighborhood cops who had mediated the garage dispute. These men wore jackets with yellow letters on the back. FBI. Federal agents! A voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Drop any weapons and put your hands on your heads, Linda screamed. It was a sound of pure, shattered despair. She threw her hands up, dropping her purse. She fell to her knees in the driveway, illuminated by the harsh spotlight of a helicopter that was now circling overhead. Kevin, inside the box, slumped against the glass. The fight went out of him instantly. He slid down the wall, sitting in the puddle of gasoline he had brought to burn me. He looked at me one last time. You knew, he whispered. You knew I would come. I counted on it, I replied. The agents approached the outer door. One of them signaled to me. I pressed the release button on the console. The magnetic locks disengaged with a heavy thud. The door swung open. 2 agents rushed into the small, fume-filled space. They didn't ask Kevin nicely. They grabbed him by the collar of his jacket and dragged him out onto the wet grass. Get off me, Kevin shouted weakly. But he was slammed, face first, onto the lawn. I watched as the handcuffs were snapped onto his wrists. I watched as another agent pulled Linda up from the ground and cuffed her too. Why are you arresting me? Linda wailed. I didn't do anything. I was just watching. You are an accessory to attempted arson, ma'am, the agent said, his voice flat. And you are named in the indictment for conspiracy to commit wire fraud. You have the right to remain silent. I opened the inner door and stepped out into the cool night air. The smell of gasoline was overpowering. My front lawn looked like a war zone. Agent Reynolds, the man from the private security firm who had coordinated with the feds, walked over to me. Are you hurt, Mr. Brown? He asked. No, I said, watching them shove my brother into the back of a blackened SUV. Kevin was kicking at the window, screaming something I couldn't hear. "We found the lighter," Reynolds said, bagging the evidence. "And the gas can, plus the video you took. It is open and shut, sir. Attempted arson on an occupied dwelling. With the fraud charges, he is never getting out." I looked at Linda. She was being led to a separate car. She saw me standing there on the porch. She didn't scream this time. She just looked at me with eyes that were dead and hollow. She looked old, suddenly incredibly old. She mouthed one word to me, "Please." I looked at her. I thought about the boy who had his college funds stolen. I thought about the man who had been spat on. I thought about the years of manipulation. I turned away. "Take them," I said to Reynolds. I walked back inside the glass fortress. The vestibule was still slick with gas. I would have to get that cleaned. The hydrangeas were ruined. I would have to replant them. But as the convoy of police vehicles drove away, their sirens fading into the distance, I realized something. The house was silent. Not the tense silence of a siege, not the heavy silence of a trap waiting to spring. It was the silence of emptiness. The cancer had been cut out. The surgery was brutal, bloody, and terrifying. But it was over. I stood in the center of my living room and took a deep breath. The air still smelled faintly of the glycol fog, artificial and sterile. I walked to the wet bar and poured myself a glass of whiskey. My hands were shaking just a little. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, aching exhaustion. I walked to the window and watched the last tail light disappear around the bend. "Goodbye, Kevin," I whispered to the glass. I was alone, finally, truly and safely alone. The fluorescent lights of the precinct interrogation room hummed with a low headache, inducing buzz that seemed to vibrate against the inside of my skull. It was 5 a.m. The adrenaline that had sustained me through the siege at the glass fortress had drained away, leaving behind a hollow, aching exhaustion. But I could not rest yet. There was one final stone to turn over, one last truth to unbury, before I could walk away from the wreckage of my family. I sat on a metal chair watching my mother through the one-way mirror. Linda was not in handcuffs anymore, but she looked more imprisoned than she ever had in her life. She was slumped over a steel table, clutching a styrofoam cup of lukewarm water. Her makeup was smeared. Her expensive victim dress was wrinkled, and her eyes were darting around the room with the frantic energy of a trapped animal. She was still ranting to the female officer sitting opposite her, her voice muffled, but audible through the speaker system.
"He set us up!"
Linda wailed, her voice cracking.
"My son Andrew is sick in the head. He invited us there. He wanted to torture Kevin. You have to let us go. We are the victims here. We just wanted a place to sleep."
I pressed the button on the intercom. "Officer, I would like a moment alone with her." The officer looked at the mirror, nodded, and stepped out. I waited a beat, then opened the heavy door and walked into the room. The air inside smelled of stale coffee and fear. When Linda saw me, she straightened up. Her eyes narrowed into slits of pure venom.
"You,"
she hissed.
"You devil, are you happy? Kevin is in a holding cell. They say he is looking at 15 years. 15 years, Andrew. For what? For trying to see his brother?"
"For arson," I corrected, sitting down opposite her. "For federal wire fraud. For identity theft. And let us not forget the part where he tried to burn me alive while you stood guard." "He wouldn't have done it," Linda insisted, though her voice lacked conviction.
"He was just upset. He needed help. And you have everything. You have that castle. You have millions. And you couldn't spare a guest room? You let us be evicted. You let the bank take our home." I looked at her. This was the narrative she had clung to for months. The story of the cruel bank and the helpless family. It was the foundation of her rage. It was time to destroy the foundation. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a single folded document. It wasn't a legal threat. It wasn't a restraining order. It was a deed of trust, stamped and notarized 6 months ago. You keep talking about the bank, I said quietly. You keep saying the bank took the house. But you never asked which bank did you? Linda frowned. What are you talking about? It was Jagged Financial. They sent the letters. Jagged Financial is a servicing company, I said. They collect payments, but they don't own the note. Do you know who bought the mortgage on your house 6 months ago when Kevin first defaulted and the foreclosure process started? She stared at me, silence stretching between us. I did, I said. The words hung in the air. Linda blinked her brain, struggling to process the information. What? She whispered. I bought the note, I repeated, sliding the document across the table. I bought it through a shell company called Safe Harbor Holdings. When the bank was going to throw you out on the street 6 months ago, I stepped in. I bought the debt, and I instructed the servicing company to lower the payments to 0 for a 6-month grace period. I wanted to give you time to get back on your feet without you knowing it was me. I wanted to save your dignity. Linda picked up the paper. Her hands were shaking so violently that the page rattled. She read the names. She read the dates. You owned the house? She stammered. For 6 months? Yes, I said. I have been housing you, Linda, for half a year. I gave you a free roof over your head. I paid the property taxes. I paid the insurance. All I asked, through the servicing company, was that Kevin pay a nominal maintenance fee of $500 a month to show good faith. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper that cut deeper than any scream. But he didn't pay it, did he? Linda looked down, her face pale. He told me he was paying it, she whispered. He took the money from my pension check every month. He said he was sending it to the bank. He wasn't, I said. I had my private investigator track the funds. Do you know where your pension money went, Mom? It didn't go to the house. It didn't go to food. I pulled out a photograph. It was a grainy surveillance shot of Kevin sitting at a high-end seafood restaurant with a woman who was definitely not his wife Emily. She was young, blonde, and wearing a very expensive bracelet. Her name is Candy, I said. With an I. Kevin has been spending your housing money on her. He has been renting a luxury apartment for her in Belltown for the last 3 months while he told you he was broke. He let the house, my house, the house I was letting you live in for free, fall into ruin so he could play sugar daddy. Linda stared at the photo. The denial that had shielded her for decades finally shattered. She made a sound that was half gasp, half sob. So, I continued, my voice relentless. When you stood outside my gate screaming that I said no to housing my brother, you were wrong. I had already said yes. I gave you a home. And Kevin took that gift, set it on fire, and then came to my door to burn me too. Linda put her head on the table. Her shoulders heaved. I didn't know, she sobbed. Oh God, Andrew, I didn't know. You chose not to know, I said. You chose to believe the lie because it was easier than accepting that your golden child was a monster. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. Kevin is going away, I said. The federal agents have the fraud evidence. The police have the arson video. He is looking at 15 years minimum. He will be an old man when he gets out. Linda looked up at me. Her face was a ruin of tears and mascara. She reached out a hand, grasping for my sleeve. Andrew, she begged. Please, I have nowhere to go. The house is gone. Kevin is gone. I am old. I am your mother. Please don't leave me on the street. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I looked at her hand. The hand that had slapped me when I was 10. The hand that had stolen from my wallet when I was 16. The hand that had waved Kevin on as he marched to burn my house down. I did not pull away, but I did not take her hand. You won't sleep on the street, I said. Hope flared in her eyes. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Andrew. I knew you had a good heart. I can cook. I can clean. I will stay in the guest room and... No, I cut her off.
The word was a steel wall. You are not coming to my house. You are never setting foot in the glass fortress again. Her face fell. Then where? I have made arrangements, I said. There is a facility called Willow Creek. It is a nursing home. It is clean. It is safe. They have 3 meals a day and a garden. Willow Creek? She asked. Where is that? It is in Montana, I said. About 800 miles from here. It is paid for. I have prepaid for 5 years of care. It is the last check I will ever write for you, Linda. The car is waiting outside to take you to the airport. You leave in 2 hours. Montana? She cried. But that is so far. I will be all alone. Who will visit me? You will have time to think, I said. And you will be safe. That is more than you gave me. I turned and walked to the door. Andrew, she screamed, the panic rising again. Don't do this. I am your mother. You can't just ship me away. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. I didn't look back. A mother protects her children, I said. You only protected one of them. Now he is in a cage, and you are going to a place where you can't hurt anyone else. Goodbye, Linda. I walked out. I closed the heavy steel door on her screaming. As the latch clicked, the silence returned. It was done. I walked out of the precinct into the gray, watery light of a Seattle dawn. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement slick and black. Standing near the parking lot entrance, shivering in a thin coat, was Emily. She was holding Kevin's son, my nephew, who was asleep on her shoulder. She looked terrified. She saw me and took a step back, clutching the boy tighter. She thought I was going to destroy her too. I walked over to her. She flinched. Andrew, she whispered. I don't know what to do. They took the truck as evidence. I have no money. I have no phone. I looked at the boy. He looked peaceful, unaware that his father was a felon, and his grandmother was in exile. You are not responsible for Kevin's sins, Emily, I said gently. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a set of keys. They were the keys to the condo in Pioneer Square, the bait I had used to trap Kevin. But the property itself was real. It was empty, furnished, and waiting. Take this, I said, pressing the keys into her hand. She looked at them, confused. What is this? It is an apartment, I said. Unit 402. It is yours, not Kevin's. Yours. I have transferred the title into your maiden name this morning. It is safe. The rent is paid forever because you own it. She stared at me, tears welling up in her eyes. Why? After everything we did. You didn't do it, I said. You were a hostage. Now you are free. I handed her a business card. Call this number on Monday. Ask for Sarah Jenkins. She has a packet for you. It contains a job offer at the reception desk of my firm. It pays $25 an hour with full benefits. It is enough to start over. Enough to raise him. I nodded at the sleeping boy. He deserves a chance, I said. Don't let him become Kevin. Emily began to cry, great heaving sobs of relief. She tried to hug me, but I stepped back. I wasn't ready for that. I might never be ready for that. Go, I said. Take the taxi. Go home. I watched her get into a cab. I watched her drive away. I didn't feel a warm glow of familial love. I felt the satisfaction of an architect who has corrected a structural flaw. I had saved the innocent parts of the structure and demolished the rot. An hour later, I stood on the balcony of the glass fortress. The sun was fully up now, breaking through the clouds and hitting the wet glass of my home, turning the entire building into a glittering jewel. Below me, the city of Seattle was waking up. The ferries were crossing the Sound, leaving white wakes in the dark water. My house was quiet. The fog from the security system had cleared. The smell of gasoline had been washed away by the morning wind. The damaged gate would be repaired by noon. The burnt hydrangeas would be replaced by sunset. I was alone. For 34 years, I had been told that being alone was the worst thing that could happen to a person. Family is everything, Linda had always said. Blood is thicker than water. They were wrong. Blood is just biology. Family is behavior. I took a sip of my coffee. It was hot black and bitter. It tasted like freedom. I had cut out the tumor. The surgery had been painful. I had lost blood. I had lost the illusion of a past I never really had. But I had survived. I looked out at the horizon where the mountains met the sky. Somewhere out there, Linda was flying to her exile. Somewhere in a concrete cell, Kevin was waking up to a metal toilet and a future of regret. And somewhere in the city, a little boy was waking up in a warm bed, safe from the storm. I was the architect of it all. I leaned against the railing, feeling the cold steel against my hands. I wasn't cold anymore. I was solid. I was fortified. I was home. Voiceover. People tell you that you can't choose your family. That is a lie. You choose them every day by who you let into your life and who you keep out. Family isn't blood. Family are the people who respect your boundaries, who celebrate your peace, and who don't ask you to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. And sometimes the most loving word you can say to yourself, the word that saves your life, is no. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a long journey into the dark side of family obligation, but I hope Andrew's victory gave you the same sense of relief it gave me. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from the busy streets of New York, the quiet countryside of England, or maybe somewhere halfway across the world? Please leave a comment below and let me know. I read every single one, and I love seeing our community grow. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of justice and karma, please make sure to subscribe to Calm Revenge Stories. Hit that like button to help us out, and if you really want to support the channel, press the hype button so this story can reach even more people who might need to hear that it is okay to say no. Stay safe, stay strong, and remember, protect your peace.